The situation that I decided to discuss today is in chapter 20, pages 230 to 235. And it kind of starts when Brandon starts to act weird. Dan and Julie are at a dinner, and Brandon calls them, and he's like, Dan, I need your help. So obviously they rush to Brandon, and Brandon just kind of talks about how, have you ever wanted to kill someone just because you're so mad at them? And Dan just gets super worried. And by the end of the night, Brandon kind of just walks out, and he leaves them kind of on a bad note. And Brandon doesn't talk to them for the longest period of time. And Dan gets super worried about him. He thinks that Brandon's going to do something that he's going to regret in the future, and he's going to get in trouble. He's going to go to juvie. He doesn't want to end up like him, is what I'm basically saying. So Dan's trying to think of ways to get to him. And his last choice is to go to Dean's house, Jeff Dean's house. And this kind of made my mind hurt, and I was like, this is not something I would have ever thought of, to go to Jeff's house. Considering all the conflict that Jeff causes, I think that's the last thing that Dan should do, because this could ruin his scenario, and people could begin to find out what his past is. And obviously, when Dan gets there, Jeff is like super surprised to see him. He's like, what are you doing here? He acts all tough, the normal Jeff. But Dan brings up how Brandon thinks that Jeff wants to kill Brandon because Jeff is blaming Brandon for his mother's death. And Jeff automatically just gets super offended and super tough and just kind of defends himself. And he actually brings up Dan's past. And Dan is just kind of shocked. He's in awe. But what he does is he kind of takes it with toughness. He kind of takes it with grace. And he's like, you know what? Yeah, that is me, but this is who I am. But Dan eventually kind of gets into Jeff. He kind of gets under his skin. And Jeff gets kind of vulnerable when Dan begins to talk about his mother. And Jeff expresses that the last thing his mother knew about him was that he was a drug addict, because Brandon told his mother that he was a drug addict. And the last thing that Jeff's mother said to him before she passed from cancer was that she was disappointed in him. And what I'm really trying to get out of this whole situation is that I think that Jeff isn't the big bad guy that we all think he is, that the book makes him out to be. I think that the situation he's in is really making him the way that he is in this book. His mother died from cancer, and the last thing that she said to him was that she was disappointed in him, and that probably just brought him so much guilt and so much pain, because the last thing we would want to hear from our parents if they died was that they loved us and that they were proud of us. But that is not the situation that Jeff is in. And I think this is really relatable to society today, because I think that when people are going through hard times, they take it out in anger, they take it out in rudeness. And I think that when we meet someone that comes off mean, that comes off kind of brutal, I think there's something much deeper going on in their life. There's always something much worse going on in their lives that we don't know about, that's going on behind closed doors, that makes them the way that they are. That's just the deal. That's just the way they're dealing with grief and pain. And I think that's exactly Jeff's situation, that he's just taking it out on other people. He's trying to blame Brandon for his mother's death. So he doesn't have to deal with the grief or the pain. And Jeff tries to act tough to cover up his grief and his pain, so people wouldn't know that this is what he's going through, because he wants to be seen as tough and cool and popular, but really on the inside he's going through something so much worse. And I think that's going on in a lot of the lives of people around us. They're going through something that's so horrible, but we are just it's hard for us to see when they're being rude to us. So that's really the reason that I chose this topic, because I think there's something really relatable to it and something that we can all relate to in the people around us, and maybe even you.